Holy shit.
It's in. Oh my god, it's in.
Alright guys, episode 3 is done. So, just to get everybody caught up to speed, the last episode was kind of a little jumping around, so just to recap, we have the chassis brackets tacked into place. They're good to go. They're all in position on both sides. I got my heim joints mounted up here just so that I can mock everything up. So now I have to pull this housing out, get some brackets tacked onto here, and get it back onto the car. Alright guys, got the housing out here. So how we're going to do this is I have my angle finder and I have my measuring tool. So if we put this on here, I know that my bars from this pinion center, it's 18.5 to the center point, so then 15/16 out from there is where my brackets are going to fall. Now I already put one of my brackets together with a couple heims to hold it together, and it fits on there absolutely perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this housing upside down, and I'm going to set the face of the housing perfectly vertical. And once I set that vertical, I then have my bracket that's going to flip around, that's going to go on here, and this face right here is also vertical. So I know that these two faces should be parallel. So once I set that vertical, then I can set this vertical, I can put a couple tacks on it and do the other side, then I can flip it over, and then I can do the upper mounts the same way. Then we can put this housing back onto the car and continue to mock everything up. So I'm going to get this all leveled up and get a couple tacks on here. Alright, so we got the upper brackets here. So these are the upper axle brackets, so I put a nice bevel on them, cleaned them up, got them ready to go. So I put one of the heims in them, and that's how they're going to sit on the axle. So now I just got to give this a couple tacks. They sit directly on top of these, so I don't really have to worry about the angle of them, and they line up directly. They're the same width, so everything's good there. So I'm going to throw a couple tacks on this. And then once I get this side and the other side done, I can put this back under the car and I can start measuring up the link lengths. Alright, so there's the complete housing. All the brackets are on. Well, tacked. So, let's get this thing back onto the car. Alright, so we got the housing in the car. So what I can do now, to get everything aligned, I can use my laser level and line it up on my marks. So it's in there, and it's obviously really low, but that's almost on axle center line. So I'm going to move this thing, get it lined up in and out, and then we'll come back in a second. Alright, so I got my axle center line here, and then I made these marks here and a mark over there on where these bolts need to line up, offset from the axle center line. So I set up my laser level. Now as you can see, I got the laser middle of these bolts right here, and then over there, not sure if you can really see it, but I got the laser, it's lined up with those bolt holes over there. And then have my angle finder on my bracket that is parallel to the pinion flange, and that's at 0. And I probably should have explained, I set this all at 0 because my transmission is at a downward angle of 2 degrees. So in an ideal world, you want the rear end pointing up at 2 degrees. This way the angle across both of the U-joints is equal and it reduces the harmonics. But, at least so I've read, the rule of thumb is that you want 2 degrees down below what it should be. This way when you launch the car under power and everything flexes, it flexes that 2 degrees and then will be in line, and that would be ideal. So the rule of thumb seems to be to put it 2 degrees down from where it needs to be. I needed to be 2 degrees up, therefore I needed to be level. So I have everything set level, and I got everything set up here. So now I'm going to measure these link bars, cut these, get them fit, and then I'm going to weld them up. So let's get these things measured. Alright, so something I feel like I should mention before I measure these. I set these, the jam nuts, 4 turns out from being bottomed out against the, the round part of the heim. So that gives me 4 threads on each side. And these are 3/4 16 thread. So that is a total of 8/16 or a 1/2 inch of movement that I can pull this together or apart. Well, together to make adjustments. Obviously I can extend it much longer than that, but I can pull this closer by a 1/2 inch on any one of these links. So that should be plenty of adjustment for what I need to do. So now I'm going to get measured. Alright, so this upper bar looks like it needs to be 4 inches and 15/16. Now I'm using the 1 inch mark as a start because I feel like the end of this is unreliable. So if I use the 1 inch, I can put that right where at the end where I need it to be. And it looks like it needs to be 15/16, maybe 7/8. So 4 and 15/16, and then I can trim it to fit. And then this bottom one, see if I can get my hand in here. Alright, so the bottom one needs to be right about 14.5, hang on, 13 3/8. 13 3/8. So let's get these cut. So got the lower bar and the upper bar tubes cut, so let's see how they fit. Now I have my laser set up here, so that should line up, and then I got the angle finder here, so this should show vertical. So this should be vertical, and that should be in line with those bolts when this bar is in. So let's get this bar in here. Okay, this one in here. Alright, so these are in. So now, bring that all the way in. Alright, so our line is looking perfect on those. And our angle is like 1 degree. So I'll be able to get that into adjustment without an issue. So that's kind of the first look at how the 4-link is going to look. Now I don't know if this is the right holes. I probably got to move the stuff around a little bit, but that's basically it right there. So I'm going to go do the other side, and then I got to take these bars and I got to go TIG weld the ends in. I got to drill them so I can do the Rosset welds, and I'm going to get all this ready. Alright, so we got the bars. I got them beveled, cleaned up. So what I gotta do is I gotta drill 4 holes in these. Well, basically 2 straight through holes. This way I can do a Rosset weld into the surface here on the end. I don't know, I watched some videos. Tim McCamus has a video on building these, and he says do a Rosset weld here and then weld them all the way around. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to drill them. I'm going to get them tacked together, and then I can test fit them in the car, get them all bolted in, really get everything set. And then once I know everything is good, then I can final weld everything. So I think that's the route that I'm going to go. So right now I'm going to set up the drill press over here and poke some holes through here. I'll probably, these are kind of thick, so he says on the thicker ones to put a divot in it. This way when you do the weld, it really gets in there, or else it'll kind of just sit on the surface. So these are kind of thick, so that's what I'll do. So I'm going to get that set up and then bring you guys over there. Alright, so looking at these, I know I want this to be like in the middle here. So I'm going to mark these tubes, because I know they're going to butt right up against there. So I'm going to give these tubes a little mark on either side. This way I know where to place these holes so that it's right in the center. So they'll do that. I'm pretty sure they're the same. Both of these are the same. Yeah, so alright, so now we got our marks for these holes. Drill them real quick, then we can get them tacked and back in the car. Alright, so we got all the chassis brackets welded in. They're all done. So now I'm going to throw the rear back in here. I got to get it aligned left to right so I can measure my diagonal bar and get that made. Alright, so I got my laser level lined up on where my arms should be. And when I look up under this arm, I can see that the laser level has everything in line. So now I know the rear is positioned laterally. So now I can jump under there and I can measure from the front diagonal bar heim joint to the rear one right over here. So I'm going to jump under there and take a measurement. So if I get my tape measure and line it up on this side over here, I bring it across. Looks like we got to cut this to about 30 and a quarter. About 30 and a quarter. So let's cut that up. Alright, so I got this drilled for the rosette welds, whatever they're called. Got these all cleaned up, beveled. I'm gonna put a couple tacks on this, then I can put this back in the car and set the housing in position. Alright guys, so we got the diagonal link in. All the 4-link bars are in. These are all in place. The rear is set side to side, right where it needs to be. So the housing is actually in the car right now. So I could actually take a jack and I could move the suspension through its range. Alright, so now that the rear is in place and I can move it and it's not going anywhere, it's fixed in this position relative to the car, I can pull the diagonal bar out and I can get that all welded up. I have this bar here that I used to weld these axle tubes on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this bar to test fit my wheels. So I made this adapter. So this has 3 lugs on it and it's precision turned so that it fits on this bar, and it fits perfectly on this bar. There's no play in this at all. So what I can do is I can bolt my wheel to this, and then I can slide this onto this bar, and then I can move it in and out to get it to fit to the fender lip. So I'm going to go bolt this to the wheel and throw the wheel on here, and I'll show you how I do that. Alright guys, so I got my wheel and I got the adapter, so I'm going to slip it right onto that bar. Alright, so now that the wheel is on that bar, I can slide the wheel in and out, and it's as it would be in the car. So I can jack this up to ride height, and then I can position it exactly where I would want it to be relative to the fender lip, and then I can measure for my axles. So I'm going to set this to where I want it to be, I'm going to set it up to ride height, and then I'm going to start measuring for my axles. My ride height is set, so now I can move this tire to where I think I would like it. And then what I'm going to do, to make sure that both wheels fit the same way, I'm going to drop my plumb bob down from the fender, and then I'm going to take a measurement from the wheel out to the plumb bob. So right there I'm about 1.5 inches, just about 1.5 inches right there. So now I'll set it up on the other side and we'll make the same measurement, and then we know the wheel's in the same place. Alright, so we got the wheel on this side at the same spacing, and that's basically how the car is going to sit once it's on the solid axle. So through the magic of editing, I'm going to show you what it looks like with both tires on from the back of the car. Should look pretty cool. And now the only other thing that I got to do is I got to do this with the slicks also that I have over there. So once I get them on, I'll show you also what that looks like with both the tires on the car. But now I can start measuring for my axles because I got to get them ordered. So I'm going to jump under the car and I'm going to start measuring to the inside of the wheel flange, from the center of the pinion to the back of the wheel flange. This way I know my distances so that I can put in the order for the axles. Alright guys, so while fitting this tire on this side, ran into a little bit of a clearance problem with the gas tank. So currently draining that down, gonna pull the tank, make a little notch in the tank for the tire to fit. So getting this drained down, then we're gonna pull the tank out. Alright, so as I climb under the world's most expensive adult jungle gym, alright, so with the wheel in position, I put the tape measure to the back of the wheel flange, and then I carry that over to pinion center. I'm looking at 28 inches, and that's from the pinion center line to the flange of the wheel. So we got to pull off 1/4 inch because the brake rotor is going to be there for the axle length. So that's where that one's going to be. So now let's measure the other side. All right, so I got the passenger wheel in. It's set to the same depth. So now I can take my tape measure, run it out to the back of the wheel, and we got 28 and 3/16. So, I mean, I'm pretty happy with how that comes out, because I've done this whole build with nothing more than this tape measure and a laser level and some Sharpie marks on the ground, and I got this thing centered to within 3/16 of an inch. So, I mean, I know it's not perfect, but I really can't complain with that. So, like I said, now I'm just going to test fit the slicks and see how those fit on here, because the wheels have a slightly different offset, but the tire size is a little different. So I'm going to throw them on. I'll show you what that looks like. And then I got to start getting the housing ends welded on. So I can order my axles now. I have all the measurements that I need to order the axles. So I think I'm going to wrap this video up here. I mean, the housing is in. The suspension is essentially built. There's a couple things I need to finish up. I'm going to run another bead of weld around the inside of these brackets because I just want to make sure that they are thoroughly held on there. But other than that, when we come back, we're going to be putting the ends on this housing, installing the axles and putting it in. And then that'll be time when I can actually put the car down on its own weight for the first time in a couple months. So thanks for watching. Later.